So today we're looking at another thematic ETF called ASX Hack by BetaShares. This is the global cybersecurity ETF. Now guys, as things get more and more digital, we are more susceptible to online risks from viruses, hackers. So cybersecurity is the next new trend identified that's going to hopefully grow in the future. Hey guys, my name is Fyzee and this channel is about finance and investing. Before we begin, as usual, this video is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Please do some research on your end as well. I'm just going through this ETF as a quick overview based on my research, but make sure to do yours as well. Let's get into the ETF. So guys, in short, ASX Hack is just giving us exposure to the world's leading companies when it comes to cybersecurity. As things get more and more digital, and even when homes start to get digital, we're definitely going to need stuff like this. Now, we can see that smart homes are slowly increasing. This is a new sort of trend. It's not really new, but it's definitely getting momentum recently. And the whole idea of smart homes is to make everything digital, right? So you can basically control everything on your phone using Wi-Fi, stuff like temperature, music, lighting. You can even turn on different things and kind of open the stove, close the stove, and other crazy stuff like that. So we're really seeing kind of a revolution moving forward. And not to mention cameras as well, security cameras inside the house and also outside the house. Now, since all of this is digital, it's being run online, it can eventually be compromised if the wrong people get their hands on it or if they can hack into the system. So it presents a pretty huge risk, right? Just imagine if someone could essentially spy inside your house and outside your house as well. They can basically monitor who is coming inside the house, who's leaving, at what times the house is empty. You know, even if you just have cameras outside the house, they can really discover so much information about your street, even the neighbor's street as well. So it really presents a massive risk to us moving forward. And not just that, even established businesses need to invest lots of money into cybersecurity, millions and millions of dollars, even billions collectively at this point now. And the reason being is because these big giant companies, even small ones, fight literally thousands of attacks every single day from cybersecurity threats. So at a business level, this is quite a big risk as well. And not to mention for defense purposes as well, this presents a massive, important, crucial opportunity. And when I say defense, I'm talking about a nation or a country protecting its national interest and protecting its borders and its citizens. Because governments often hold very confidential and very private information about their military, all their tactics and strategies, and especially the US and these other big countries as well. And if this sort of data was to be compromised, then this could render the country quite vulnerable, if you guys get what I mean, right? If that sort of information gets into the wrong hands, the hackers could potentially sell this information off to a counterparty and make a lot of money, and then that counterparty may be a rival country or something like that, and this could be quite devastating for the actual country to begin with, if you guys get what I mean. So to protect a nation's military, whether that be the Navy, the Air Force, or the Army, whatever it may be, this is quite a crucial space to look into. So since this has to do with our national interest, you guys can definitely see why this is so important. So you guys can really see how this affects all of us, either at the consumer level, where, you know, we're trying to protect our smart homes and our smart cars and stuff like that. And then at the business level as well, whether that be small businesses or big giant businesses like Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, those sorts of giant businesses. And then you have the government level as well, where the government needs to protect its citizens and its national interest as well, whether that be their state secrets or defense secrets or whatever that may be. So you guys can see that it literally affects every single person out there. So looking into the benefits of this ETF, the first benefit is the fact that you will get to invest in a fast growing global sector. Now, as mentioned before, hackers, intruders will always find new ways of breaching into some online sort of software, even your house as well. And cybersecurity companies always need to make sure that they're always adapting, and this is why this is a fast growing sector. And companies also need services like this to make sure that their own systems can be secure, especially companies right now that offer a cloud-based solution or like a SaaS software. Those companies need to make sure that that software is fully secure so the end consumer's data does not get compromised and all their customers' information is secure and safeguarded. So you can really see why this is a fast-growing trend. The second benefit of the ETF is the fact that you will get convenient and cost-effective access, right? So basically, with one trade with this ETF, you're going to get full access to all these leading companies that are out there, and you only need to just make one trade. You don't need to buy each company, you know, separately and specifically and do your own research and kind of look into every single company, look at its financials. That's the kind of main benefit of buying an ETF altogether anyways. Now, once again, I mentioned this in like almost every video when it comes to technology, and that's the fact that this sector is quite underrepresented in the Australian economy. I think our economy, whether that be ASX 200 or 300, I think about 5 to 10% or even lower is IT companies. So buying an ETF like this is going to give you that exposure to the much needed tech sector. And the third and last benefit of the ETF is the current and future industry leaders diversification, right? So essentially at the moment there are lots of cybersecurity giants held in the ETF already. We'll check the holdings in just a second, but the ETF also includes some emerging companies as well that specialize in certain aspects of this space, because cybersecurity once again is quite a broad term. You have different sorts of cybersecurity in different areas, so we'll look into that in just a second. Because just keep in mind that cybersecurity is not just about preventing viruses or preventing virus attacks, it is much more than that. And often as consumers, we look at things from a consumer level, of course, and we think of cybersecurity as basically preventing against viruses, but of course it is just much more vast than that, and we do need companies covering all bases. Now guys, let's look at the returns for the ETF in just a second, but if you have found any sort of value so far, please leave a like or subscribe. It really does help out with the YouTube algorithm. Let's get into it. So having a quick look at the returns for the ETF, the year-to-date return is about 5.5%, as you guys can have a look, and the 1 year return is sitting at about 24%, which is quite nice. But once again, 1 year ago, the market was just still kind of recovering, so the returns are going to be quite high. And looking at the maximum return since the ETF was listed, which was around early September 2016, the return is about 83% per year. Not per year, but over that period. And looking at the graph, you guys can see that just recently the ETF has hit its all-time highs, which is of course very good to see. Now just keep in mind that this data is less than 5 years, so let's have a look at the actual index, which has been running for much longer than that, and we can get a much more kind of holistic picture. So the index that this ETF is tracking is the Nasdaq CTA Cybersecurity Index, and now let's have a look at the returns for the index. And scrolling down to the returns, as you guys can see, we can see that the cumulative 10-year return has been about 316% over the 10-year period, of course. So which means that you would have essentially quadrupled your money over that time period if you were able to somehow invest in this ETF. And if we were to break it down into an annualized return, you can see that on the right column, the 10-year return has been about 15.33% per year. Now that's basically a compounded return. So if that sort of figure of 316 was divided over that 10-year period, that's how much return you would be getting compounded annually. So if you guys didn't understand that, let me show you a quick example so hopefully it starts to make more sense. So here I've got my calculator as usual with these videos, and let's say as an example that you invested $10,000 at the beginning of that 10-year period. So we'll just put in $10,000 right here, and based on the compounding interest rate of 15.33%, that's basically the return. We would increase this figure by that much. So I'll just type this figure in. So 15.33%. So in the first year, your sort of return would go up by this much, and that would be your total investment. So that's year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. So based on that compounding rate, by the 5th year, you would have been able to essentially double your money, hypothetically, of course. So that's the 5th year, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9, 10. So by the 10th year, you guys can see that we're sitting at about $41,000. We started off with $10,000 and we've essentially quadrupled our money over that 10-year period. Now, if you guys have a look at the overall market returns, whether that be for the ASX 200 or 300 or even the S&P 500 or even VTS, which tracks the global sort of American market, you'll find that this sort of return is nowhere to be found because the market generally does not go up by that much over that period of time extensively. This is only because this index is tracking those leading cybersecurity companies, and this basically outlines how much growth there has been over the last 10 years. And if we look at cybersecurity just as of now, if you were to ask the question to yourself, do you think cybersecurity is going to grow in the future? I'm almost certain that you would say yes, and you would think for sure that there is more potential in this industry to grow. So you can see the sort of potential that we're presented with here. And this essentially shows us the power of compounding, and that's exactly why I like looking at thematic ETFs, because these sort of ETFs have the potential to outperform the market in the short to medium term, because they're not just tracking the overall market, they're tracking a specific sector of the market. And in this ETF's example, this ETF is tracking the the cybersecurity trend. Now, as always, guys, you probably would not have been able to invest in this ETF 10 years ago because we're just looking at the index, but as always, we're just looking at the power of compounding with these examples. So I always stress that compound interest is so important to look into, and the power of compounding is really amazing once you really start to realize the potential of it. Looking at the management cost for the ETF, it is about 0.67% per year, which is priced similar to kind of the other thematic ETFs that are out there. This is going to cost you roughly $67 per $10,000 invested. But as we can see, the returns have been pretty solid over the past kind of 10 years. So you can see the potential of this industry. So it may be worth kind of looking into, and it may be worth paying those fees. The frequency for the dividend is semi-annual, which means that you'll get a dividend paid to you twice per year. So that's pretty standard as the other companies listed on the ASX. Jumping into the portfolio holdings for the ETF, we can see that the top 10 are the companies listed right here. And the ETF tracks a total of 40 companies at the moment. Now, just by looking at this list, when I was making this video and trying to kind of do some research, I'll be very honest, I don't know all the companies on here. I've only heard of some of them, like, Accenture and Zscaler, CrowdStrike, but I have never heard of companies like Splunk and Fortnite, VeriSign. I've heard of VeriSign, but Varonis and all these other sort of companies, but I'm sure that they're in the right sort of space, because that's why you buy an ETF, because you want the fund managers to invest in the right companies and track the ETF based on the index. Jumping into the sector allocation, we can see that there is a big focus on software with system software, then you have internet services and application software as well, and equipment and consulting as well. Bit of defense, aerospace and defense at about 4%. And as mentioned, of course, not surprising at all, it is very important for nations to look into this sort of stuff and kind of have these securities in place, because it's in our national interest to do so. And these are pretty interesting times that we live in, because a country which is thousands of kilometers away from Australia could theoretically attack Australia without even setting a foot on Australian soil or Australian airspace through cyber attacks, right? This is the sort of world that we live in now, where countries can really render other countries vulnerable through the power of cyber attacks and the internet. And this is really interesting to me, because countries can literally launch an invasion without doing a physical invasion, traditional war style. They can do a 21st century kind of war style, if you guys get what I mean. And lastly, the country allocation is 90% focused towards the US. And look, not too surprised here, they do have quite a lot of technology, and this is, look, once again, not a surprise. We do have a bit of Israel as well at about 3.4%, a few European countries, and surprisingly India as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the other thing that shocked me a little bit was the fact that I can't see any China here at all, right? It doesn't even have any sort of allocation. We have India, but we don't have China. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Not too sure why that's happening, but we do have one company from Japan. So I thought that was pretty intriguing. Now for me, guys, I'm still going to research this area and look at some other ETFs I hold as well, because currently my portfolio skews a lot towards the US market, and buying this ETF may even kind of skew me too much towards the US. So I need to look into my portfolio and kind of find the right allocations if I'm going to invest in this ETF. So I'm going to try and find the true holding of all the companies that I own through ETFs indirectly, and kind of see where I stand, because I don't want too much overlap. But I still think this area is very important to look into, and hopefully you guys realize the value of how crucial this sector actually is. Let me know if you actually found this interesting, because looking at cybersecurity and war and this sort of stuff is very interesting to me. Now guys, if you want to explore some other mega trends as well, you can check out my video on ESPO. This is the esports and gaming ETF, and as a gamer, I believe this space can really take off in the future as well. And this video is ACDC ETF. This is the battery tech and lithium technology ETF based on electric cars, and since they're looking to grow in the future, this could be pretty interesting. And guys, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. But I still think this